1883 had a strong premiere with almost 5 million people tuning in to watch the first episode on Paramount Network. It's also become the most watched premiere on Paramount Plus. The second episode had a couple of historical figures in it, so I thought we'd take a look at these real-life characters and discuss them both in the context of this show and of history. So, episode 2 spoilers ahead. We'll begin with Marshal Jim Courtright, because he was the more important character in terms of the story of the show. The Marshal's straightforward method of taking care of the bandits in the saloon was great to watch, probably one of the best moments of 1883 so far, and the real Courtright was as much of a troublemaker as he is on the show. He served as the Fort Worth City Marshal from 1876 to 1879, so the TV character was based on the real-life person, but I believe the timeline has been changed, which is understandable because this is not a strict historical adaptation. Anyway, Courtright's ruthless and no-nonsense attitude reportedly allowed him to significantly reduce the murder rate in Fort Worth, which explains this line from episode 2, quote, "If anybody here fancies himself a gunman, you're in the wrong town. There's only one killer in Fort Worth, and that is me," end quote. So it appears as though the real Courtright struck enough fear in people's hearts that this led to less violent crimes in Fort Worth when he was the city marshal. It is also speculated that he was a racketeer, so he got paid for quote-unquote protecting businesses, and if business owners refused to pay with cash, they paid with their lives. After his stint in Texas, Courtright moved to New Mexico, where he eventually served as a deputy U.S. Marshal. He committed murders in that time period, so he had to flee the state after becoming an outlaw. Courtright continued living in Fort Worth after this incident because he wasn't extradited to New Mexico. However, his days were numbered. Courtright's showdown with another famous gunfighter, Luke Short, went south as Short killed Courtright in 1887 and he died at the age of 39. It's fair to say that Courtright is a very complicated individual, and I think he's a good pick for an adaptation like this. In westerns, I like watching lawmen who cross the line. Some of them are as bad as the outlaws they hunt, and that's obviously good for dramatic purposes. Billy Bob Thornton perfectly exudes confidence and viciousness in this role, so I think this is a great casting choice and I hope we'll see him again on the show. Our main characters have left Fort Worth, so Courtright is left behind, but the story isn't really that concerned about historical realism when it comes to Courtright. For example, I wouldn't mind a standoff between Courtright and Sam Elliott's character. Can you even imagine? I mean, that would be awesome. Moving on to our second historical character, this one is General George Meade, who is portrayed by Tom Hanks. The scene involving him begins with James Dutton waking up after the Battle of the Antietam in Maryland. The real photo used at the start here is taken in front of the Dunker Church, and we see both Union and Confederate soldiers lying dead on the field. James is a Confederate soldier and he is captured by the Union Army. General Meade approaches James to apprehend him, and we know that James goes on to spend 3 years in prison until the Civil War ends. Both Meade and James look horrified at this moment because they're witnessing the cost of war, as that particular day, September 17, 1862, is the bloodiest single day in American military history, with more than 22,000 casualties, which includes the dead, injured, missing and captured people from both sides. Even though the Battle of the Antietam was technically a stalemate and there wasn't a decisive victory, the Confederate forces retreated, which practically ended General Lee's Maryland campaign. As far as I know, that was the South's first attempt to invade a Union state. And following this battle, on September 22nd, President Lincoln announced the Emancipation Proclamation, which is the executive order that changed the legal status of enslaved African Americans in the Confederacy from enslaved to free. And this was brought into effect almost 3 years later, when the Union won the war, which freed more than 3 million slaves. Coming back to General George Meade though, he is best known for commanding the Battle of Gettysburg victory in 1863 when the Union forces defeated the Confederates in Pennsylvania. General Meade was a reluctant leader. He was a one-star brigade general at the start of the war, but he was appointed to command the Army of the Potomac just 3 days before the Battle of Gettysburg, as the previous commander, Joseph Hooker, resigned. Meade continued to play an important role after Ulysses S. Grant became the general-in-chief of all the Union armies, and approximately 7 years after the Civil War's conclusion, in 1872, Meade passed away due to pneumonia while he was still on active duty. There isn't that much to say about Tom Hanks' portrayal of Meade because he had so little screen time, but I'm sure the history buffs among us appreciated this cameo. I thought the moment Meade and James shared was touching, but I don't think we'll see Meade again on the show. And in general, I think they should keep throwing in a few historical figures here and there because the Old West is full of interesting people. I'm enjoying 1883 a lot so far, and making this video has been fun. Let me know if I've made any mistakes in this video. I'm not a history buff. And please feel free to share any interesting details you know about Courtright or Meade in the comments. Like the video if you've enjoyed this breakdown, and subscribe for more movie reviews and TV show breakdowns. That's it for now. Take care and see you in the next video.